So today we will discuss on the other topic. Okay, this is the our renal system is going on. So we will discuss on the topic, and the topic name is the diuretics. Diuretics. Okay, you know about the diuretics because we have studied, we have learned about the diuretics in brief. I think in your first year in cardiovascular system under the topic drug used for the treatment of the hypertension. We read about the diuretics in brief in first year also, and we will continue. We will learn about diuretics in detail in renal system. So it will take 2 class for us to complete this topic diuretics. So I think you have some knowledge about the diuretics. What is the simple definition of the diuretics? So diuretics are the drugs. Diuretics are the drugs, or they are the agent that accelerate the rate of the urine formation and the excretion of the urine. Diuretics are the drugs that accelerate the rate of the urine formation and the excretion. Okay. So finally, the result of the diuretics, the use of the diuretics is that results the removal of the sodium and the water from the kidney outside the body. So this is the simple definition, simple introduction about the diuretics. So what are the diuretics? So diuretics are the drugs that accelerate the rate of the urine formation and the excretion of the urine outside the body. So the final result of the diuretics will be the removal of the sodium and the water. So sodium and the water from the kidney outside the body. So when the diuretics are used, simply when the diuretics are used, when there will be the excessive formation of the sodium and the water within the human body, when there will be the excessive formation of the sodium and the water within the human body. So when there will be the excessive sodium and the water, edema. We know about the edema. No, what is the edema? Edema is the collection of the fluid, sodium and the fluid, collection of the fluid in the interstitial tissue. That is called the edema. So when the edema is there, so during the edema, what will be there? There will be the excessive accumulation of the sodium and the water. There will be excessive accumulation of the sodium in the water within the human body or the interstitial tissue. So that can be removed by using the diuretics. And the other use of the diuretics during the hypertension. So how it is useful in the hypertension? It is useful in the hypertension by removing the sodium and the water. So what will happen when there is removal of the sodium and the water? So venous return will be reduced. When the venous return will be reduced, there will be the reduction in the cardiac output. So that is the factor that reduces the blood pressure during the hypertension. So what is the diuretics? Diuretics are the drugs that accelerate the rate of the urine formation and the excretion. So the final role of the diuretics is the removal of the sodium and the water from the kidney outside the body. So they generally use for the treatment of the edema and for the treatment of the hypertension. Okay, now the classification of the diuretics. I think about some of the diuretics we have already discussed in the first year, not in detail, but in the brief. So we will discuss about the diuretics in the detail in this system. Okay, classification. So number one is the thiazide diuretics. What are the drugs that comes under the thiazide diuretics? They are the chlorothiazide, hydrochlorothiazide. Okay, chlorothiazide and the hydrochlorothiazide. Among these, the most important drug is the most commonly used drug is the hydrochlorothiazide. Second is the loop diuretics. Okay, loop diuretics, the drugs that comes under the loop diuretics, that is also called the high ceiling diuretics. They are the furosemide, torsemide, and the ithacrinic acid. And the ithacrinic acid. So furosemide, torsemide, and the ithacrinic acid. And the osmotic diuretics, the drugs that comes from the osmotic diuretics are the mannitol and the glycerin. Okay, there are the six groups are there. 3 groups are the thiazide diuretics, loop diuretics, and the osmotic diuretics. Okay, so we will discuss about each drug in detail, each group in detail in the coming slide. Carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Sorry, 5 groups are there. Carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. The drugs that comes under the carbonic anhydrase inhibitors are the acetazolamide, dorzolamide, and the brinzolamide. The most commonly used drug is the acetazolamide. So at least remember 2 drugs, that is the acetazolamide and the dorzolamide. And the potassium sparing diuretics. Okay, spironolactone and eplerenone. Where the spironolactone, they belongs to the subgroups, that is the aldosterone receptor antagonist, whereas the amiloride and the triamytrine, they belongs to the subgroup, that is the sodium channel blockers, sodium channel blockers. So these are the classification of the diuretics. They are the thiazide diuretics. Diuretics, I will repeat it again. What are the diuretics? So diuretics are the drugs that accelerate the rate of the urine formation and the aspiration. You know about that. So their final role is that results the removal of the sodium and the water from the kidney outside the body. Okay, you know about it. So they are used for the treatment of the edema and the hypertension. Why in the edema? Because in edema there is the excessive accumulation of the fluid and sodium and the fluid and the water, sodium electrolytes in the interstitial tissues. And in hypertension, they reduces the plasma volume by reducing the fluid and the sodium. So because of the venous return is reduced. So when the venous return is reduced, cardiac output is reduced. So that reduces the blood pressure. I think you know about that now. Should I continue? Okay. Now, classification. Thiazide diuretics, they are the chlorothiazide and the hydrochlorothiazide. Loop diuretics, they are the furosemide, torsemide, and ethacranic acid. Osmotic diuretics, they are the mannitol and the glycerin. And the classification, carbonic anhydrous, continuation of the classification, carbonic anhydrous inhibitor. They are the acetazolamide, dorzolamide, and the brinzolamide. Potassium sparing diuretics. One of the subgroup is the aldosterone receptor antagonist, as spironolactone and the eplerenone. And the sodium channel blocker, they are the amiloride and the triamterene. So we will discuss about each drug in now. Thiazide diuretics. I think we had discussed about this topic in the first year. We will discuss about this topic again in detail in the second year under the renal system. Thiazide diuretics, chlorothiazide and the hydrochlorothiazide. The most commonly used drug is the hydrochlorothiazide. Okay. Thiazide diuretics. So what is the mechanism of action of the thiazide diuretics? Okay. So you can see in this one is the schematic diagram. This one is the schematic diagram of the. So you can see this one is the luminal membrane. This one is the. Okay, you can see this one is the lumen of the. This one is the lumen of the renal tubules. This one is the lumen of the renal. You know the renal tubules, proximal convoluted tubules. There's loop of the Henle and loop of the thin descending limb, thick ascending limb, and then the distal convoluted tubules and the collecting that you know about that. So this one is the lumen. This white part is the lumen, renal tubule lumen. Which part? Distal convoluted tubule. Lumen of the distal convoluted tubule. Okay, and this one is the luminal membrane. And again luminal membrane. So what will be the transportation of the electrolytes from the lumen towards the circulation? This is the extracellular compartment. This one is the extracellular compartment. What are there? Two parts of the extracellular compartment. One is the vascular compartment. The second is the interstitial compartment. Extracellular compartment. This one is the vascular compartment, and this one is the basolateral membrane. This line is the basolateral membrane, and then the interstitial tissues. So this one is the lumen. This one is the luminal membrane. This one is the vascular compartment, and this one is the basolateral membrane, and this one is the interstitial tissue. So this one is the extracellular compartment, and this one is the luminal membrane. So what is the mechanism of action So normally what happens? Normally, sodium chloride co-transporter is present in the luminal membrane of the distal convoluted tubule. Sodium chloride co-transporter is present, or symport sodium chloride symport is present in the luminal membrane of the distal convoluted tubule. So what is the normal function of sodium chloride? That are used for the reabsorption of the sodium and the chloride from the distal convoluted tubules of the lumen of the distal convoluted tubules, and from here this sodium will be reabsorbed by the sodium potassium ATPase, which is present in the basolateral membrane. And what is the role of the sodium? That will be the transportation of the sodium to the interstitial tissues, and in turn there will be the release of the potassium outside the interstitial tissue. Okay, so mechanism of action of the thiazide diuretics. They act in distal convoluted tubules. Where they act in the distal convoluted tubules. In which transporter? They act on the sodium chloride. They act over the sodium chloride co-transporter or the symport, and inhibit the sodium chloride symport. So what will happen when there is the inhibition of the sodium chloride import? There will be the no reabsorption of the sodium and the water. From the distal convoluted tubule. So what will happen? The sodium and the water, when there will be no reabsorption of the sodium and the water will be excreted outside the body, will be excreted outside the body. Outside the sodium in the water will be that increases the urine formation, so that accelerates the rate of the urine formation and the excretion of the urine outside the body. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think you know about that. No, you know about that. Okay. So this one is the. So what is the mechanism of action? I will repeat in detail again. So they act over the distal convoluted tubules. They act over the distal convoluted tubules. In which part distal convoluted tubules? Sodium chloride symport. Sodium chloride symport, which is present in the luminal membrane, which is present over the luminal membrane of the distal convoluted tubules. The inhibition of the sodium chloride symport, what will happen? There will be the no absorption, reabsorption of the sodium and the water. So when there will be no reabsorption of the sodium and the water, there will be the removal of the sodium and the water outside the body. That means the increased acceleration of the formation of the urine and the increased acceleration of the excretion of the urine. So in this way, they will reduces the edema as well as the blood pressure. Okay, this one is the same. I have already discussed about this mechanism of action in schematic diagram. So I will provide you the slide later. Okay, so no need to explain. I will only explain in the picture. Okay, in this schematic diagram. Okay, so now indication. So what is the use of the indication? You know about the hypertension. They are most commonly used for the treatment of the hypertension. They are most commonly used for the treatment of the hypertension. Okay. Okay, hypertension. Number one is the hypertension. Why? How they are useful in the hypertension? They are useful in the hypertension by reducing the venous return. Sodium and the water, when excessive removal of the sodium and water will reduce the venous return, blood volume. Blood volume, when reduction in the blood volume will result the venous return. Venous return will be reduced. So what will happen? The cardiac output will be reduced. That reduces the blood pressure. Second is the heart failure. Second is the heart failure. Okay. Second is the heart failure. So heart failure, congestive cardiac failure and the chronic heart failure. Congestive cardiac failure and the chronic heart failure. So what happened in the heart failure? There's a formation of the edema. In heart failure, there's a formation of the edema. In heart failure, there's a formation of the edema as well as the sometimes the pulmonary edema. So to reduce, what happens is the heart failure, edema and the pulmonary edema is formed. Acute pulmonary edema is formed. So in edema, there's the accumulation of the fluid and the electrolytes in interstitial tissue. So that will be removed by this thiazide diuretics. Okay. Hypercalciuria. Okay. Other role of the diuretics is thiazide diuretic, other than the sodium and the water removal. One of the other role of the thiazide diuretic is they promotes the reabsorption of the calcium. In over the distal convoluted tubules. So they promote the reabsorption of the calcium over the distal convoluted tubule. So in condition like the hypercalciuria. So what's the hypercalciuria? Hypercalciuria is the condition where there is the excessive excretion of the calcium in the urine. Excessive excretion of the calcium in the urine. So by using the thiazide diuretics, so we know that the thiazide diuretics that promotes the reabsorption of the calcium in over the distal convoluted tubule. So they reduces they will be control the they reduces the excretion of the calcium in the urine. In this manner, they are, in this way they are used for the treatment of the hypercalciuria. Okay. Other is the nephrogenic diabetic insipidus. So what is the diabetes? So okay, we will discuss about this topic, diabetes insipidus, in detail in coming classes. So just remember that what is in detail, how it is useful in diabetes, how thiazide is useful in the diabetic insipidus. That will also be discussed in detail. Their mechanism in detail in coming classes. Okay, just remember here they are used for the treatment of the diabetes insipidus. Okay, what is the diabetes insipidus? In diabetes insipidus, there is an excessive excretion of the excessive excretion of the urine and the excessive excretion of the fluid and the electrolytes in the urine. That is characterized by the dysuria and the dyspepsia. Dysuria and the dyspepsia. Okay, nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. So indication are the hypertension, heart failure, hypercalciuria, and the nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. Okay, last slide for today. We will continue in coming class. Last slide. So I think you know about that. No, I think you know about that. Hypokalemia. So adverse drug reaction number one is the hypokalemia. So how the hypokalemia? So the mechanism for the hypokalemia is when excessive when the sodium, excessive sodium, sodium. This uh, we know that the sodium and the water reabsorption will be inhibited in the distal convoluted tubules. So sodium, there will be the sodium load, excessive sodium load to the collecting ducts. There will be the excessive sodium load to the collecting ducts. In collecting ducts, in the lumen of the luminal membrane of the collecting ducts, sodium, calcium, sodium potassium exchanger is present. Sodium calcium exchanger is present. So what is the normal role of the sodium calcium exchanger? Reabsorption back of the sodium and the excretion of the excretion of the potassium along with the hydrogen ions, So when the over the long time period, when the thiazide diuretics will be used, so what will happen? This process will going on, will be going on. Then the reabsorption of the sodium and the excretion of the potassium. So because of the excretion of the potassium on the long terms, that produces the hypokalemia. Okay, and the second is the hyponatremia. So what is the hyponatremia? Hyponatremia is the loss of the sodium, because we know that they remove the excessive removal of the sodium when they are used for the this longer term, for the long duration. Okay, and the hypovolemia, that is the volume depletion. That's called the hypovolemia. We know that because the thiazide diuretics, they excessively excreted when they are used for the longer term, longer duration, because of the excessive loss of the fluid and the water, that produces the hypovolemia. Hyperuricemia. Okay, hyperuricemia. That's the uric acid. Now we have already discussed about that. We know that thiazide diuretics, they are the weak acid. Okay, thiazide diuretics, they are the weak acid. Okay, so uric acid is excreted through the organic cation transporter, which is present in the proximal convoluted tubules. Okay, hyperuric this and this thiazide diuretics, it also excreted through that organic cation transporter, which is present over the proximal convoluted tubule. So they fight for the same organic cation transporter to be excreted into the proximal convoluted tubule. So when they are used for the longer duration, what will happen? They compete for the same organic cation transporter, and when this thiazide diuretics is used for the longer duration, thiazide diuretics will be able to excrete through the organic cation transporter, while uric acid will be not able to excrete through the organic cation transporter. So over the long period, there is the excessive accumulation of the uric acid in the human body, that will cause the hyperuricemia. Hypercalcemia. Why the hypercalcemia? Hypercalcemia because of they promote the reabsorption of the calcium at distal convoluted tubules. Other is the hyperglycemia, because of the impairment in the release of the insulin and the tissue uptake of the glucose, due to the impairment of the release of the insulin and the tissue uptake of the glucose. Hyperlipidemia, exact reason is unknown, but they also produces the hyperlipidemia. And the hypersensitivity, that can be produced by that's a type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. You know the mechanism about that. So the adverse drug reaction of the thiazide diuretics are the hypokalemia, hyponatremia, hypovolemia, hyperuricemia, hypercalcemia, hyperglycemia, hyperlipidemia, and the 3 hypo and the 4 and the 5 this hyper. You have to remember that. Okay, hypokalemia, hyponatremia, hypovolemia, hyperuricemia, hypercalcemia, hyperglycemia, hyperlipidemia, and the hypersensitivity. Loop diuretics or the high ceiling diuretics. Okay, so why they call the high ceiling diuretics, or why they call the loop diuretics? The reason that is why they call the loop diuretics, because the act which part of the renal tubules, that is the loop of the Henle, particularly to the thick ascending limb of the loop of the Henle, And why they call the high ceiling diuretics? Because these are the most we can say maximum response among the diuretics. The maximum response of the diuretics is shown by this group of the drugs, high ceiling diuretics. Okay, so which one? There are 3 drugs we know about, that furosemide, torsemide, and the ithacranic acid. And the ithacranic acid. Butamenite, one other drug is also there, but that is not necessary. Furosemide, torsemide, and the ithacranic acid. Among them, these 3 drugs, among the loop diuretics, torsemide, the longest plasma half-life, the drug with the longest plasma half-life is the torsemide. Okay, so they may ask you the multiple choice question: which of the following diuretics or the loop diuretics has got the longest half-life, that is the torsemide. When I say the longest half-life, that means the duration of action of the torsemide is the longer than the other loop diuretics of this group. Okay, and the furosemide, okay, that is the most potent drug. Furosemide among the diuretics, this loop diuretic, the most potent drug is the furosemide. Okay, so loop diuretic, there are three drugs: furosemide, torsemide, and the ithacranic acid. Among which the torsemide, the longer duration of action of the torsemide, or the longest, we can say the longest plasma half life, and the most potent drug is the now mechanism of action. Okay, we will see in the picture. I will describe in the picture. So mechanism of the action: thick ascending limb of the loop of the Henle. That means these diuretics act on the thick ascending limb of the loop of the Henle. Thick ascending limb of the loop of the Henle. So again, same picture, schematic diagram. This one is the luminal membrane. This one is the luminal membrane, and this one is the basolateral membrane. This one is the basolateral membrane. So what does that mean? Luminal membrane. So when it is, this one is the luminal membrane. So this part. So this part is the renal tubules. This part is the renal tubules. Okay, this part is the renal tubules. Thick ascending limb of the renal tubules. Okay, we can say the lumen. So this one is the luminal membrane, and this one is the basolateral membrane. This one is the basolateral membrane. This one is the basolateral membrane. Okay, so basolateral membrane is the luminal membrane. So basolateral membrane. Okay, we can say this is the membrane between the interstitial space and the vascular compartment. This one is the vascular. You can say this one is the vascular compartment. Okay. So what happened here? In thick ascending limb of the loop of the Henle, one co-transporter is present. The name of that co-transporter is the sodium chloride co-transporter. Sodium chloride. We can say again the potassium co-transporter. Sodium chloride is the potassium co-transporter. So what is the role of the sodium chloride or the potassium co-transporter? Reabsorption of the sodium and the chloride. Normally, that is a normal function. Reabsorption of the sodium and the chloride. And what will happen from the renal tubules, from the lumen of the thick ascending limb of the loop of the Henle towards the intracellular compartment. So first to the vascular compartment, and then again at the basolateral membrane, sodium potassium actiphase is present. So what is the role of the sodium potassium actiphase? So we can say the influx of the sodium and the efflux of the potassium from the interstitial space to the vascular compartment. Okay, so this is the role of the thick ascending limb of the loop of the Henle. That means we can say the sodium or the water will be. So we know that along with the sodium, it also has the tendency to have the water molecules. So along with the sodium and the water will be reabsorbed at thick ascending limb of the loop of the Henle through this co-transporter. Now, what is the mechanism of action of the loop diuretics? They act in the thick ascending limb of the loop of the Henle, and they are the inhibitor. They bind to this sodium chloride co-transporter, and they are the inhibitor. They are the inhibitor of the sodium potassium chloride co-transporter. Okay, so inhibits this sodium potassium chloride co-transporter. So when there will be the inhibition of this co-transporter, what will happen? There will be the inhibition of the sodium and the potassium. There will be the inhibition of the sodium. There will be the inhibition of the sodium and the water. There will be the inhibition of the reabsorption of the sodium and the water at thick ascending limb of the loop of the Henle. So what will happen? There will be the no reabsorption. So when the sodium and the water will be excreted through the urine. Okay, that is the mechanism of action of the loop diuretics. I will repeat it again. What is the mechanism of action of this loop diuretic? They act over the thick ascending limb of the loop of the Henle and inhibit this co-transporter. The name of the co-transporter is the importer, or the co-transporter is the sodium potassium chloride co-transporter. By inhibiting this co-transporter, there will be the inhibition of the reabsorption of the sodium and the water. So because of the reabsorption of the sodium and the water, there will be the it will enhance the excretion of the sodium and the water into the urine. So that is the diuretics effect of the loop diuretic. Okay, so this is the same thing I have already explained in the picture. Okay, mechanism of action, no need to explain it again. Now, what is the indication? Indication of the furosemide. Okay, indications of the furosemide. Okay, so diuretics. What are the major role of the diuretic? Number one, to reduce the excessive fluid accumulated in the interstitial tissues. Okay, to reduce the excessive fluid accumulated in the interstitial tissue. We can say that the edema. Okay. Second is the hypertension. It reduces the hypertension. How it reduces the hypertension? By reducing the plasma volume. So by reducing the plasma volume, venous return will be reduced. When the venous return will be reduced, cardiac output will be reduced. That will reduce the blood pressure during the elevated blood pressure during the hypertension. So now indication of the heart failure during the heart failure, particularly which type of the heart failure? That's called acute pulmonary edema. Acute pulmonary edema. That is the acute pulmonary edema, heart failure. It is the stage of the heart failure. That is the life-threatening condition. What happens there? There will be the pulmonary congestion. There will be the pulmonary congestion. How the pulmonary congestion will be happen? That is because of the extravasation of the fluids. Extravasation of the fluids in pulmonary capillaries. In pulmonary capillaries from in the interstitial tissues or the alveolar tissues of the pulmonary capillary. That's called the acute pulmonary edema of the heart failure. Okay. So how it is useful? By reducing the so how this diuretics, loop diuretics is useful in the acute pulmonary edema. It reduces the interstitial, it reduces the fluid present in the interstitial tissue by increasing the excretion, by increasing the excretion of the sodium in the water into the urine. Okay, that's the acute pulmonary edema of the heart failure. That's the drug of the choice for the acute pulmonary edema of the heart failure. Second is the hypertension. I have already discussed earlier. Okay, third is the hyperkalemia. Now, how it is useful in the hyperkalemia? Okay, hyperkalemia, that is the, we know that potassium is the intracellular element. Potassium is the intracellular compound or the element which is present, intracellular element, and sodium is the extracellular element. We know about that. Okay, so hyperkalemia is a condition in which there is excessive accumulation of the potassium in the plasma. Excessive accumulation of the potassium in the plasma, more than 5.5 milliequivalent per liter. That's if the plasma level of the potassium is more than 5.5 milliequivalent per liter. That is called the hyperkalemia. That, or in simple language, we can say the simple word, we can say the excessive accumulation of the potassium in the plasma is called the hyperkalemia. Now, how this diuretics reduces the excessive potassium present in the plasma to maintain to the normal range, to bring the plasma level of the potassium to the normal range. We know that as we have already discussed earlier, that sodium potassium it inhibits the sodium potassium co-transporter. So inhibition of the sodium and the fluid will be reabsorption will be inhibited. Now this excessive sodium will be transported to the excessive sodium in the water will be transported to the collecting ducts. So in collecting ducts, sodium potassium exchanger is present. Sodium potassium exchanger is present in luminal membrane of the collecting duct. So what is the role of the sodium calcium exchanger? The role of the sodium potassium exchanger is that it will reabsorb back the sodium. It will reabsorb back the sodium, overloaded sodium that is present in the collecting ducts. Okay, so in turn, this sodium potassium exchanger, it will excrete the potassium along with the hydrogen ions. So what will happen? Because of that mechanism, sodium will be reabsorbed back, overloaded sodium will be reabsorbed back, and in turn the overloaded, the hyperkalemia is present. That potassium will be excreted into the urine along with the hydrogen ions. So in this manner, it reduces the excessive potassium present in the plasma body. Okay, so that is the indication of the hyperkalemia. Okay, is that clear? Okay, now hyperkalemia. What happened in the hyperkalemia? We know that the mechanism of action of the diuretics, loop diuretics. What is the hyperkalemia? Hyperkalemia is the excessive accumulation of the potassium in the plasma or in the blood or in the serum, whatever we can say, but generally it is called the plasma. So plasma is the vascular compartment, extracellular fluid. We know that the potassium is the element of the intercellular compartment. Now, how this hyperkalemia, it is useful in the hyperkalemia. So it reduces the excessive accumulation of the potassium present in the hyperkalemia by inhibiting the because we know that the sodium and the sodium will be reabsorbed. Inhibition of the sodium will be there at the thick limb of the ascending ascending limb of the loop of the Henle. So from there, the sodium will be reached to the collecting ducts. Okay. In collecting ducts, overloaded sodium will be there. So in collecting ducts, luminal membrane of the collecting ducts, this sodium potassium exchanger is present. That is one other transporter that is called the sodium potassium exchanger. The role of the sodium potassium exchanger is the normal. Generally, it's a normal function is the reabsorb back the sodium into the vascular compartment and excrete and in turn it secretes the potassium along with the hydrogen ions into the renal tubules of the collecting duct. So what will happen? The excessive potassium present in the plasma volume will be excreted along with the hydrogen ion into the collecting ducts, and it will be excreted outside the body to the urine. So in this manner, it reduces the excessive plasma potassium level present in the body. So that is, in this way, it is useful in the hyperkalemia. Okay, now acute renal failure. Acute renal failure. So it is also indication. This furosemide is also diuretics is also useful for the treatment of the acute renal failure. So what is acute renal failure? In acute renal failure, there is a reduction in the formation of the urine. A reduction in the formation of the urine. That is, sometimes it's below the 300 ml, below the 300 ml. So to increase the urine formation, the furosemide, this loop diuretics is useful in the acute renal failure. Okay, so indication, they are the acute pulmonary edema of the heart failure, hypertension, hyperkalemia, and the acute renal failure. Okay, these are the indications of the furosemide. Adverse drug reaction. Adverse drug reaction, again, adverse drug reaction. Okay, the most common is the ototoxicity. The most common is the ototoxicity. Furosemide results the ototoxicity is the most common. Okay, diuretics induce ototoxicity. The mechanism is not necessary, but it is believed that they directly affect the vestibulocochlear system. Among that, also the cochlear system of the inner ear. Cochlear system of the inner ear. Okay, that is not necessary. Just remember that the ototoxicity is produced by the loop diuretics. Okay, again, the hyperuricemia, similar to the hydra diuretics. How this loop diuretics that produces the hyperuricemia? That is the, we know that the uric acid present in the human body is normally excreted through the organic cation transporter present in the luminal membrane of the proximal. So when we are using this loop diuretics, the loop diuretics is also the uric acid. So it also follows the same organic cation transporter to secrete it into the proximal convoluted tubules, or the proximal part of the renal tubules. Okay, when both the organic uric acid present in the human body, and this loop diuretics, it uses the same organic cation transporter. Over the long time, organic cation transporter, this diuretics, they are able, they means the competition, and they are able to secrete through that transporter into the proximal convoluted. Okay, now the hyperuricemia. Okay, again, I will repeat it again. Hyperuricemia, how it is useful in the hyperuricemia. In hyperuricemia, organic cation transporter, they are this uric acid and this diuretics, loop diuretics, they are secreted through the organic cation transporter, which are present in the proximal convoluted tubules. Both of them try to compete with the same transporter to secrete it into the proximal convoluted tubule. But when this loop diuretic is used for the longer duration, they are able to secrete through that organic cation transporter, while uric acid will not be able, or there is the minimum secretion through that organic cation transporter. So over the long period, along with the concomitant use of the this furosemide or the loop diuretics, there will be the accumulation of the organic uric acid in the body, or in the plasma, that will result the hyperuricemia. Okay, hypovolemia, that's because of the loss of the fluid that we have already discussed earlier, because it inhibits the furosemide or this diuretics, loop diuretics, they inhibits the reabsorption of the sodium in the water at the thick ascending limb of the loop of the hand. Okay, hypokalemia, again, how hypokalemia? Because we know that when there will be the overloaded sodium in collecting ducts, sodium potassium exchange, sodium will be reabsorbed back, and the potassium will be excreted into the urine. Okay, and when it will be happen for the longer duration, excessive loss of the potassium in the urine will result the hypokalemia. Similar to the metabolic alkalosis, with the same mechanism, along with the potassium, hydrogen ions are also excreted into the urine, and over the long period, if the excessive loss of the hydrogen ions from the body, that will lead to the metabolic alkalosis. Now, any confusion in this slide? Adverse drug reaction, ototoxicity, how this diuretics, loop diuretics, that produces the ototoxicity, hyperuricemia, hypovolemia, hypokalemia, and the metabolic alkalosis. Any confusion? Everything is clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, should I continue?
Yes, sir.
Now, osmotic diuretics. Okay, when we say the osmotic process, you have to remember the osmotic process here. What is the osmotic? So drugs that comes out of the osmotic diuretics are the mannitol and the glycerin. Okay, now what is the osmotic process? Osmotic process, we have to remember the osmotic process. What is the osmotic process? In osmotic process, when the two compartments are there, solvent and the solution, So there will be the transportation of the fluid from the region of the towards the region of the higher concentration, towards the region of the higher concentration. You know about the osmosis, no? What is the osmosis? When two solutions are there, two solutions are. When I say the solution in two when two solutions are there in a compartment that is divided by the semi-permeable membrane, okay, and the when I say the solution, this is a solute plus the solvent, no, the solute plus the solvent, and one of the solution is the lesser concentrated, and the one of the solution is the highly concentrated. So there will be the so to balance the solution, there will be the movement of the fluid from the region of the lower concentration towards the higher concentration, or we can say the only the fluid will be moved toward the region of the higher concentration to manage the solution. That's called the osmosis, no? So this osmotic diuretics, they also follow the same principle. They also follow the same principle. Okay, you know about the osmosis, okay? Mannitol and the glycerin, the drugs that comes out of the drugs, osmotic diuretics, are the mannitol and the glycerin. Okay, now how they are useful, how they are, what's the mechanism of action of the, okay, now the mechanism, osmotic diuretics. Okay, which part of the renal tubules they act? They act on the descending limb of the loop of the Henle primarily. They act on the descending limb of the loop of the Henle primarily, and on the proximal tube. So primary side of the action is the descending limb of the loop of the Henle, and then to the proximal tubules. So what will happen? These osmotic diuretics, they are the non-absorbable. They are non-absorbable. Number one thing, they are the non-absorbable or the limited reabsorption. There's a limited reabsorption at the renal tubular membrane. Which part? Loop of the Henle and the proximal tubules. So what will happen? They produces the osmotic effect. They produces the osmotic effect. So what is the osmotic effect? If they are not absorbable, they increases the plasma and the renal tubular lumen osmolality. They increases the plasma and the renal tubular lumen osmolality. When the osmolality of the plasma membrane, plasma or the renal tubular lumen will be increased more than the intracellular compartment. So what will happen? What will happen? There will be the osmotic, through the osmotic process, there will be the transportation of the fluids from the region of the intracellular compartment to the vascular compartment, and from the vascular compartment towards the renal tubules. And when the fluid is excreted into the renal tubules excretion of the excessive fluid into the urine. That is the, that increases the urine formation and the excretion of the urine. This is the mechanism of action of the, this is the mechanism of action of the this osmotic diuretics. I will repeat it again. Which part of the renal tubules they are used? They act on the descending limb of the loop of the Henle primarily, descending limb of the loop of the Henle primarily, and on the proximal tubules and on the proximal tubules. So what will happen when they act on that side? Number one thing, they are the non-absorbable. They are the non-absorbable, or the limited, or the limited reabsorption will be there at the this descending limb of the loop of the Henle and the proximal tubules. So they produces there the osmotic effect. So what is the osmotic effect? Osmotic effect. How they produces the osmotic effect? So when they are not reabsorbed, or the limited reabsorption will be there, they increases the osmotic, they increases the plasma osmolality, or they increases the renal tubular osmolality. So by increasing the plasma osmolality or the renal tubular osmolality, what will happen? There will be the shifting of the fluids, or they withdraw the fluid from the region of the intracellular fluid compartment to the interstitial tissue, and from the interstitial tissue towards the plasma volume, and from the plasma volume towards the renal tubules. So in this way, they increases the they increases the urine formation and the excretion. Read indications. What are the indications? Indications of the osmotic diuretics. Indication of the osmotic diuretics. Okay, the most common indication is the cerebral edema. So what happened? The cerebral edema. Cerebral edema. Edema of the cerebrum. Edema of the cerebrum. Edema of the cerebrum. Okay, excessive accumulation of the fluid in the interstitial tissues of the cerebral tissues. Interstitial tissues of the cerebrum. They are called the cerebral edema. So when there will be the cerebral edema, there will be the increased intracranial pressure. When there will be the cerebral edema, there will be the increased intracranial pressure. Now to reduce that intracranial pressure, to reduce that, okay, to reduce that intracranial pressure, these osmotic diuretics are useful. They are indicated in the cerebral edema. That is the most common. That is the most common. That is the most common indication of the osmotic diuretics. Second is the acute renal failure. Okay, in acute renal failure, there's a decreased formation of the urine is there, less than 300 milliliter in 24 hours. Okay, so to increase the urine formation, or to increase urine excretion in the acute renal failure, they are used for the treatment in the osmotic diuretics. They are indicated in the acute renal failure. Acute renal failure may be because of the causes of the acute renal failure may be the because of the drugs,
because of the drugs, because of the trauma, or because of the shock. Okay, that is not necessary. Just remember they are useful for the treatment of the acute renal failure. Number one indication is the cerebral edema to reduce the intracranial pressure, and number two indication is the acute renal failure. Okay, adverse drug reaction. Adverse drug reaction. So, what are the adverse drug reaction? Expansion of the extracellular volume. Number one is the expansion because they withdraws the blood, they withdraws the fluid from the region of the extracellular fluid compartment towards the from the intracellular fluid towards the extracellular fluid compartment. So, what will happen? They may, over the long term use, they may increase the region of, they may increase the expansion of the extracellular volume. Okay. Second is the dehydration. Dehydration. Sometimes, not really but not every time. Excessive loss of the fluid may lead to the dehydration or the hyponatremia. We know that sodium is present in the extracellular fluid, that is in the interstitial tissues as well as as well as in the vascular compartment. So if we are using this, if this osmotic diuretics will be used, they cause the excessive loss of the fluids from the interstitial tissues and from the plasma volume level. So what they result? They result the hyponatremia. If the fluid will be lost, they result the hyponatremia. Hyponatremia भनेको excessive this we can say the excessive accumulation of the sodium in the plasma is called the hyponatremia. Or nausea, boredom, vomiting, and the headache. Sometimes exact cause is not remembered, but they may result the nausea, vomiting, and the headache. Okay. So number one is the expansion of the extracellular volume is the most common. Dehydration and the hyponatremia, because of the loss of the fluid, the result of the dehydration and the hyponatremia. And the other common adverse drug reaction are the nausea, vomiting, and the headache. Potassium sparing diuretics. Potassium sparing diuretics. What is the role of the potassium sparing diuretics? Potassium sparing diuretics. Okay. So we know that the problem with the loop diuretics, the problem with the thiazide diuretics, they are the common drugs. They are the common diuretics which are used for the treatment of the hypertension, edema, and the acute renal failure. Okay. The problem with the potassium diuretics is the excessive loss of the potassium, hypokalemia. Okay. Hypokalemia sometimes becomes a life-threatening situation. Sometimes becomes a life-threatening situation, or it results the muscle weakness. Hypokalemia, one of the clinical features of the hypokalemia is the flaccid paralysis. We can say the muscle weakness or the flaccid paralysis. Muscle weakness or the flaccid paralysis. Okay. Or sometimes it's a life-threatening situation, or it may result, hypokalemia may result the sinus arrhythmia or cardiac arrhythmia. Okay. So while giving the thiazide diuretics or the loop diuretics, hypokalemia must be managed. So how that can be managed? How hypokalemia can be managed while giving the thiazide or the loop diuretics? It should be given along with the potassium sparing diuretics. So if they are given along the potassium sparing diuretics, this potassium sparing diuretics will be helpful to reduce the loss of the potassium, for the loss of the potassium from the body. When this thiazide or the diuretics, other diuretics will be given concomitantly. Okay. So the objective of giving the goal of giving the potassium sparing diuretics is to reduce the excessive loss of the potassium along with the while giving with the which is produced by the loop diuretics and the thiazide diuretics. Okay. Aldosterone receptor antagonist. So there are the two types of the diuretics, potassium sparing diuretic. One is the aldosterone receptor antagonist, and the second is the sodium channel blocker. Okay. Aldosterone receptor antagonist and the sodium channel blocker. Okay. So what the drugs that comes under the aldosterone receptor antagonist are the spironolactone and the eplerenone, and the sodium channel blockers that are amiloride and the triamcinolone. At least remember one drug, that is the aldosterone receptor antagonist. The most common drug is the spironolactone, and for the sodium channel blocker, the most common drug is the amiloride. Okay. So we will continue. Okay. You have, I think after 3 minutes, it will be off and we will restart. We will resume that. Okay. So we will continue. We will try to finish the potassium sparing diuretics today. Okay. That will be our final drug for today. Now, what is the aldosterone receptor antagonist? Okay. The drugs that comes under the aldosterone receptor antagonist are the spironolactone and the eplerenone. Okay. Now, what is the mechanism of action? So, aldosterone receptor antagonist. So, we know that the aldosterone. What is the aldosterone? Aldosterone is the, okay. Before knowing about the mechanism, we have to know about aldosterone. Aldosterone they are the corticosteroids. They are the corticosteroid hormone. They are the basically two types of the corticosteroid: mineralocorticosteroids and the glucocorticosteroids. Glucocorticoids or the mineralocorticoids, we can say mineralocorticoids and the glucocorticoids. From where they are secreted? This glucocorticosteroids, they are secreted from the adrenal cortex. cortex of the adrenal gland. Cortex of the adrenal gland. Okay, cortex of the adrenal gland. Cortex of the adrenal gland. They are divided into three parts: zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and the zona reticularis. Okay, so GFR is the mnemonic. Okay, zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and the zona reticularis. The role of the zona glomerulosa is the zona glomerulosa results the mineralocorticoids. The mineralocorticoids are the aldosterone and the deoxycorticosterone, and the zona fasciculata. Zona fasciculata they secretes the glucocorticoids like the cortisone, hydrocortisone, dexamethasone, baclobethasone. We will discuss about that. Okay, and the zona reticularis they secretes the androgen. That secretes the androgen. Okay. The important thing is that adrenal gland secretes the glucocorticoids. So this corticosteroids. Which part? Zona glomerulosa secretes the aldosterone. Zona fasciculata secretes the glucocorticoids, and or we can say mineralocorticoids is secreted by the zona glomerulosa, or the glucocorticoids is secreted by the zona fasciculata. Okay, aldosterone. So what we know that what are the receptors for the aldosterone? The receptors for the aldosterone are the during first year we have discussed that the intercellular receptors. Intercellular receptors. Okay. So we will discuss about that. Okay.
Diuretics. So we have already finished uh, thiazide diuretics, about the thiazide diuretics, about the loop diuretics, osmotic diuretics. So now two diuretics are remaining. They are the potassium sparing diuretics and the carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Okay, so potassium sparing diuretics. Potassium sparing diuretics. Oh, okay. By name, why they call the potassium sparing diuretics? They spare the potassium. They spare the potassium. That means they inhibit the loss of the potassium. They inhibit the loss of the potassium. These diuretics inhibit the loss of the potassium. So why these diuretics are necessary? These potassium sparing diuretics are necessary because we know that the with loop diuretics and the thiazide diuretics, they are the most commonly used diuretics for the hypertension, for the edema, for the renal failure. If they are used for the hypertension, if they are used for the heart failure, they have to use for the longer duration. And one of the common adverse effects of the potassium sparing diuretics is potassium sparing diuretics is hypokalemia. Okay, and hypokalemia is the problem that may lead to the life-threatening situation like the this cardiac arrhythmia. And other than that, they also produces the muscle weakness. Okay, so to prevent or to inhibit or to minimize the hypokalemia while giving the this loop diuretics and the thiazide diuretics, we need to give also the potassium sparing diuretics to prevent the or to inhibit the hypokalemia. Okay, so what are the types of the potassium? What are they are the subclassified into, or they are the subgroup in the aldosterone receptor antagonist and the sodium channel blocker. Aldosterone receptor antagonist and the sodium channel blocker. So what is the aldosterone? The drugs that comes under the aldosterone receptor antagonist are the spironolactone and the iplerenone, and the sodium channel blocker. They are the amiloride and the triamterone. Okay, should I continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now
Yes, sir.
now the aldosterone. First of all, we have to discuss about the aldosterone receptor antagonist. So what is the aldosterone receptor antagonist? They are the spironolactone and the iplerenone. They are the spironolactone and the iplerenone. Okay, mechanism of action. Okay, we will discuss about the mechanism of action. So before knowing about the aldosterone receptors, so what are the aldosterone? Okay, aldosterone, they are the corticosteroids. They are the corticosteroids. We know that the corticosteroids, there are the two types of the corticosteroids. Okay, we will discuss about the corticosteroid in the endocrine system. Okay, so we will briefly discuss about the this corticosteroid. They are the two types, glucocorticoids and the mineralocorticoids. Okay, from where this corticosteroids are released within the endogenously in the human body, they are from the adrenal cortex. They are from the adrenal cortex. In adrenal cortex, cortex of the adrenal gland, which are divided into three parts: zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and the zona reticularis. Zona glomerulosa secretes the aldosterone, that is a mineralocorticoids, and the zona fasciculata secretes the glucocorticoid, that's the cortisone or corticosteroid. Okay, cortisone. Okay, now aldosterone. Once the general physiology, this is the this general release of the aldosterone. Normally the aldosterone is released from the zona glomerulosa. Okay, zona glomerulosa. When the aldosterone is released from the zona glomerulosa, it binds to their receptors which are present within the cells of the various organs. One of the nephrons of the kidney. Okay, nephrons, they all nephrons, they also contains the aldosterone receptors. Nephrons also contains the aldosterone receptors. Okay, where they are present?
within the cytoplasm of the nephrons, within the cytoplasm of the nephron. So what happened? This glucocorticoids, this MR is the aldosterone. Aldosterone, they are released from the zona glomerulosa. They entered into the cytoplasm of the within the cell of the nephrons, and within the cell of the nephron, aldosterone receptor is present. Aldosterone receptor is present. The MR is called the MR is the this MR is the mineralocorticoids receptor. That is the aldosterone receptor. So aldosterone binds to the aldosterone. This is the aldosterone. This comes from the zona glomerulosa. It binds to the aldosterone mineralocorticoid receptor. They forms the complex that is called the aldosterone receptor, receptor complex, aldosterone receptor complex. And then they entered within the nucleus of the nucleus, where they bind to the synthesis the mRNA. And this mRNA, they synthesis the aldosterone induced protein. Aldosterone induced protein. Now this aldosterone induced protein, what is the role of the aldosterone induced protein? They induce the sodium potassium exchanger, which are present in the sodium potassium exchanger, which are present in the luminal membrane, So what is the role of this sodium potassium exchanger? Reabsorption of the sodium and the efflux of the potassium, Okay, that means the sodium is reabsorbed and the potassium is excreted into the renal lumens. Okay. So what is the mechanism of the aldosterone receptor antagonist? The mechanism of the aldosterone receptor antagonist is they bind to the aldosterone receptor antagonist. They bind to the aldosterone receptor within the cytoplasm of the nephrons. They bind to the aldosterone receptor within the cytoplasm of the nephron. So what will happen? Aldosterone will not be able to bind to the aldosterone receptor. Aldosterone will not be able to bind to the aldosterone receptor. Okay. So there will be the no synthesis of the mRNA. There will be the no synthesis of the aldosterone induced protein. Now this, when there's an inhibition of the synthesis of the aldosterone induced protein, so what will happen? That will inhibit the sodium potassium exchanger. That will inhibit the sodium potassium exchanger. So when the sodium potassium exchanger will be inhibited, what will happen further? There will be the inhibition of the reabsorption of the sodium. Okay, while potassium will be not excreted into the lumen of the renal tubules. That means there will be the inhibition of the excretion or the loss of the potassium from the luminal membrane. So in this way, it will reduces the hypokalemia, which is produced by the other diuretics. Is that clear? Should I repeat it again? Any confusion? Can you hear me? Any confusion? Okay, I will repeat it again. Okay, what will happen? Aldosterone, they are released from the zona glomerulosa. Okay, normal function. Okay, so what is the aldosterone receptors are present within the nephrons, within the nephrons of the kidney. Okay, you know the nephrons, they are the structural and the functional unit of the kidney. Okay, so within the nephrons or the cytoplasm of the nephrons, aldosterone receptors are present. So aldosterone bind to the aldosterone receptor, and this aldosterone receptor complex they enters into the nucleus, and within the nucleus they synthesis the mRNA, and within the mRNA, so further the synthesis the aldosterone induced protein. The role of the aldosterone induced protein is they stimulate the sodium potassium exchanger. The function of the sodium potassium exchanger is the reabsorption of the sodium and the loss of the potassium into the renal tubules. But when we give the aldosterone receptor antagonist, what will happen? They bind to the aldosterone receptor. So aldosterone will not be able to bind to the aldosterone receptor. So there will be the inhibition of the synthesis of the aldosterone induced protein. So that will also inhibit the further stimulation of the sodium potassium exchanger. So what will happen? The reabsorption of the sodium will be inhibited, and the loss of the potassium will also be inhibited. So it will spare potassium loss it will spare the potassium loss from the renal tubule. This is the mechanism of action of the aldosterone receptor antagonist. Now it is clear.
Yes, sir.
Should I continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, indications. What are the indications of the aldosterone receptor antagonist? Okay. Number one indication is we know that they are used with the other diuretics like the furosemide and the thiazide. In diseases, we know that the furosemide and the thiazide, they are used for the hypertension and the heart failure. Okay, and the edema. So they leads to when they are used for this furosemide and the thiazide, when they are used for the longer duration, they produces the hypokalemia. Okay, so the furosemide and the thiazide should be used with the potassium sparing diuretics like aldosterone receptor antagonist and spironolactone to prevent the loss of the potassium, hence minimize the chances of the hypokalemia. Okay, that we have already discussed. Okay, Other is the secondary hyperaldosteronism. Secondary hyperaldosteronism. Okay, that is the condition. It's the disease. There are two types. What's the hyperaldosteronism? Excessive presence of the aldosterone in the blood. Excessive presence of the aldosterone in the blood is called the aldosteronism. Hyperaldosteronism. Okay. There are of the two types. One is the primary and the one is the secondary. Primary is because of the disease of the zona glomerulosa. Okay, adrenal gland, and the secondary hyperaldosteronism is because of the disease of the other organs that leads to the or because of the drug induced that leads to the hypersecretion of the aldosterone from the hypersecretion of the aldosterone from the hypersecretion of the aldosterone. Okay, that leads to the second. Okay, primary hyperaldosteronism and the secondary hyperaldosteronism, that is a excessive production of the aldosterone from the zona glomerulosa. That is because of the other diseases, not because of the disease of the adrenal gland, because of the other diseases. That is called the. So to reduce the level of the to reduce the level of the aldosterone in the plasma, spironolactone is also used in secondary hyperaldosteronism. Important indication is they are used with the thiazide or the loop diuretics to prevent the loss of the potassium. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Adverse drug reaction. Okay, we know that they inhibit the loss of the potassium because that inhibits the we know that they inhibit the sodium potassium exchanger. So what will happen? Normal loss of the potassium will also inhibit when they are used for the longer duration. That may lead to the hyperkalemia. Okay, and the gynecomastia. Okay, spironolactone they also causes the gynecomastia. Okay, that is not necessary because reproductive system, we have not done clear idea about the reproductive system. Okay, gynecomastia, spironolactone also produces the gynecomastia. Okay, gynecomastia is the benign enlargement of the male breast tissue. Gynecomastia is the benign enlargement of the male breast tissue. Okay, metabolic acidosis. Okay, metabolic acidosis, we know that along with the potassium, hydrogen ions also lost along with the normally with the sodium potassium exchanger. When the sodium is reabsorbed along with the potassium, this hydrogen ions also lost. But we know that this potassium sparing diuretics, they inhibit the sodium potassium exchanger, so there will be the inhibition of the loss of the inhibition of the reabsorption of the sodium, or there will be the inhibition of the excretion of the sodium, this potassium along with the hydrogen ions. So what will happen when this potassium sparing diuretics are used for the longer duration? When the hydrogen ions or the potassium, they are not lost, there will be the accumulation of them. There will be the accumulation of the hydrogen ions within the human body, within the blood, that will lead to the metabolic acidosis. Is that clear? Any confusion?
No, sir.
Anyone, please, anyone? Only Sudesha, you are only every time the Sudesha Rimal only responding. Any problem? I'm asking to all of you. Any problem? If any problem, then please.
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. Should I continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now the sodium channel blocker. Second drug is the sodium channel blocker. They are the amiloride and the triamterone. Sodium channel blocker, they are the amiloride and the triamterone. Okay. Triamterone. Okay. So mechanism of action now. Okay. Now we know that in lead distal tubules and the collecting ducts. Okay. In lead distal tubules and the collecting ducts. Okay. One thing I forget to mention that potassium sparing diuretics, they are used. They generally act over the collecting ducts or the lead distal tubules, lead distal convoluted tubules or the collecting ducts. Okay. So lead distal tubules and the collecting ducts, they contain the two types of the cell: principal cells and the intercalated cells. Principal cells, they contains the sodium potassium exchanger. Okay, what is the use of the sodium channel inhibitor? So we know the sodium potassium exchanger, they are present in the luminal membrane. They are present over the luminal membrane of the principal cells of the lead distal tubules and the collecting ducts. I will repeat it again. Sodium potassium exchanger, they are present over the luminal membrane of the principal cells of the lead distal tubules and the collecting duct. So what is the inhibition? What is the mechanism? Sodium channel inhibitor, sodium channel inhibitor, sodium channel inhibitor. What are the sodium channel inhibitors? The sodium channel inhibitors are the the sodium channel inhibitors like the amiloride or the triamcinolone. Most common drug is the amiloride. They directly inhibit the sodium potassium exchange. They directly inhibit the sodium potassium exchange. So while directly inhibiting the sodium potassium exchange, what will happen? Reabsorption of the sodium will be inhibited, and the loss of the potassium along with the hydrogen ions. Okay, loss of the potassium along with the hydrogen ions will also be inhibited. So in this way, they spare the loss of the potassium. Okay, they spare the loss of the potassium. Okay, now the indications same, like in addition with the other diuretics. Potassium channel inhibitors, they are used in addition with the other diuretics like the furosemide or the thiazide diuretics, that is the loop diuretics or the thiazide diuretics, in diseases like the hypertension and heart failure to prevent the loss of the potassium, hence minimize the chances of the hypokalemia. Similar, they are used in addition. They are not used alone. They are used in addition with the. They are not used alone. They are used in addition with the. They are not used alone. They are not. Okay, so they share what? Okay. Indications. Okay, indications. Furosemide is basically the potassium sparing diuretics. They are not used alone. They are used in addition with the loop diuretics or the thiazide diuretics to prevent the loss of the potassium. Okay. Sometimes they may ask you the question. These drugs are provided in the combination furosemide plus spironolactone. Sometimes the furosemide plus chlorothiazide plus amiloride, or sometimes the, in general, we can say the loop diuretics plus the potassium sparing diuretics, or the thiazide diuretics plus the potassium sparing diuretics. Okay, so this they may ask you the question, or sometimes in Viva, or we can say the sporters may be present, and they may ask you the question, rationale of combination of the drugs of the this furosemide plus amiloride, or the furosemide plus the spironolactone, or the thiazide plus the amiloride, or the thiazide plus the spironolactone. So what is that? We have to write that the problem with the furosemide or the thiazide diuretics, they loses the potassium. They induces the loss of the potassium, that will lead to the hypokalemia. If the spironolactone or the this amiloride, they are used along with the loop diuretics or the thiazide diuretics, they inhibit the sodium potassium exchanger. So what will happen? They inhibit the loss of the potassium, hence they minimize the chances of the hypokalemia. Adverse drug reaction, again hyperkalemia. I have already discussed earlier, because they inhibits the loss of the potassium. So when they are used for the longer duration, excessive accumulation of the potassium in the human body may result the hyperkalemia. Similarly, the metabolic acidosis, it is also because they inhibit the loss of the hydrogen ions along with the potassium. So when they are used for the longer duration, they may lead to the excessive accumulation of the hydrogen ions within the body or the plasma or the blood, that will lead to the metabolic acidosis. All of the other loop diuretics, okay, thiazide diuretic, they produces the hypokalemia or the metabolic alkalosis, while the potassium sparing diuretics, they produces the hyperkalemia or the metabolic acid. Okay, carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. Okay, what are the carbonic anhydrase inhibitor? The drugs, they inhibit the carbonic anhydrase enzyme. Okay, we will discuss about that. Okay, acetazolamide, dorzolamide, and the brinzolamide. Okay, most important drug is the acetazolamide. At least remember one drug, that is the acetazolamide, or additionally also remember the dorzolamide. But if you want to remember one drug, that is the acetazolamide. Okay, carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, acetazolamide. Okay. अब यो तो छ त्यसमा. First of all, we have to discuss what is the role of the proximal tubules. Okay, carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, they are used for they act over the proximal tubules. Okay, so first of all, we have to discuss about the normal physiology of the proximal tubules. Okay, we can start from here. Okay, from A, this side. We can start from here. Okay, so what will happen? This is the luminal membrane. Okay, this is the luminal membrane. This is the interstitial space. This is the interstitial space. This is the basolateral membrane. This is the luminal membrane. This part is the renal tubules, lumen of the renal tubules. This part is the interstitial space. Okay, and this is the epithelium. This is the epithelial space. So what will happen? Over the luminal membrane, sodium hydrogen antiporter is. Okay, what is the difference between the antiporter and the sympater? This is the sympater. What is the sympater? Both the ions, they are traveling toward the same direction. That is called the sympater. Antiporter, when I will say the antiporter, what will happen? One will go to the one side and another ion will go to the other side. Opposite direction. Both the ions will be traveled to the opposite direction. They are called the antiporter. Okay. Or this one is the symporter and they are the antiporter. Okay. The sodium hydrogen antiporter or the exchanger. Okay. Simple language is the exchanger. Okay. Sodium hydrogen exchanger or the antiporter, they are present over the luminal membrane. So what is the loss of the sodium hydrogen antiporter? Reabsorption of the sodium and the loss of the hydrogen ion. Reabsorption of the sodium or the loss of the reabsorption of the sodium, reabsorption of the sodium or the loss of the hydrogen ions. Okay, reabsorption of the sodium or the loss of the hydrogen ions. Okay, reabsorption of the sodium or the loss of the hydrogen ions. So what will happen? Sodium. So when the hydrogen ions, they are present in the lumen of the renal tubules. They bind with the bicarbonate. They bind with the bicarbonate. They bind with okay, they react with the bicarbonate. They react with the bicarbonate, forming the carbonic acid. Forming the carbonic acid. Now this carbonic acid, which is present in the renal tubules, will be slowly splitted into carbon dioxide and the hydrogen ions. Carbon dioxide and the hydrogen ions normally. But the role of the carbonic anhydrase, Ca is the carbonic anhydrase. The role of the carbonic anhydrase is it will accelerate the splitting of the carbonic acid into the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen water. Carbon dioxide and the water. Again, this carbon dioxide, it will enter into the epithelial cell. And it will bind to the hydrogen ions which is present within the epithelial cell. It will combine with the hydrogen ions which is present in the epithelial cell. That will result the formation of the carbonic acid within the epithelial cell. Okay, we can say this one is the renal tubular carbonic acid, carbonic anhydrase, and this is the within the cytoplasm of the epithelium of the carbonic anhydrase. Okay, and this combining of the carbon dioxide with the water will be accelerated by the for the formation of the carbonic acid will be accelerated by the carbonic anhydrase enzyme. So this bicarbonic acid, bicarbonic acid, okay, this will be further splitted into the bicarbonate and the hydrogen ions. Now this bicarbonate, this is the sodium bicarbonate. This is sodium bicarbonate symporter. The role of the sodium bicarbonate symporter, which is present in the basolateral membrane, is for the movement of the carbonic acid, this bicarbonate along with the sodium towards the interstitial space. So we can say further in interstitial space, this sodium bicarbonate, the sodium will bind to the this carbonic bicarbonate to form the sodium bicarbonate. Along with this sodium bicarbonate, fluid will also be reabsorbed. Okay, and here these hydrogen ions, they will go for this process, sodium hydrogen exchanger. So what is the function? What is the role of the sodium bicarbonate? Is the along with the sodium bicarbonate, fluid will also reabsorb. Okay, this is the normal mechanism of the we can say the carbonic anhydrase. I will repeat it again. What will happen? First of all, sodium hydrogen antiporter. The role of the sodium hydrogen antiporter is the reabsorption of the sodium and the loss of the hydrogen ions. So hydrogen ions, they will be lost into the renal tubules. Within the lumen of the renal tubules, hydrogen ions will bind to the bicarbonate to form the carbonic acid. Okay, now the carbonic acid, generally they will be slowly splitted into the carbon dioxide and the water, but the role of the carbonic anhydrase is they will accelerate the splitting of the carbonic acid into the carbon dioxide and the water. For the carbon dioxide, it will be reabsorbed back into the epithelium, cytoplasm of the epithelium, and within the cytoplasm of the epithelium, they will combine with the water to form the carbonic acid again, and this action will also accelerated by the carbonic acid which is present within the epithelium of cytoplasm of the epithelium, and further this carbonic acid, it will further splitted into or reacted into or catabolized into the bicarbonate and the hydrogen ions. So bicarbonate will be entered into the along with the sodium into the interstitial space through the sodium bicarbonate co-transporter. within the sodium bicarbonate co-transporter, sodium will bind to the bicarbonate to form the sodium bicarbonate. So when the sodium bicarbonate will be reabsorbed into the basolateral membrane into the interstitial space, along with that, water fluid will be also reabsorbed. Fluid will also reabsorb. Okay. So in this way, the main action is the reabsorption of the fluid along with the main action. The main physiological role is the of the sodium bicarbonate, the reabsorption of the fluid along with the sodium bicarbonate. This is the normal mechanism. Now, what is the mechanism of action of the carbonic anhydrase inhibitor? They inhibit the carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. They inhibit the carbonic anhydrase which are present in the lumen of the renal tubules and which are present within the cytoplasm of the epithelium. So what will the final outcome will be the inhibition of the reabsorption of the sodium bicarbonate. Inhibition of the reabsorption of the sodium bicarbonate. If there will be the inhibition of the reabsorption of the sodium bicarbonate, there will be also the inhibition of the reabsorption of the fluid. There will be also the inhibition of the reabsorption of the fluid. So in this way, it will reduce the reabsorption of the fluid into the interstitial space. So that will lead to the loss of the fluid into the urine. Is that clear? Should I repeat it again?
No, sir.
Any confusion? Anyone? Any confusion? I will repeat it again. The mechanism of action of the carbonic anhydrase inhibitor is that they will irreversibly inhibit the carbonic anhydrase which are present in the renal tubular lumen and the carbonic anhydrase which are present within the cytoplasm of the epithelium. So what will be the final outcome? Inhibition of the formation of the carbonic acid. That will further inhibit the reabsorption of the sodium bicarbonate. Okay, by the sodium and the bicarbonate co-transporter. So when there is the inhibition of the reabsorption of the sodium bicarbonate, what will happen? Reabsorption of the fluid will also be inhibited into the interstitial space. So that there, what will the final role will be the excessive excretion of the fluid into the urine. That produces the diuretic effect. Indications. Okay, indications. Rather than the diuretics effect, they are used for the treatment of the glaucoma. By reducing the intraocular pressure. You know about that. In the autonomic nervous system, we have also read about the acetazolamide. Acetazolamide is used for the treatment of the open angle glaucoma by reducing the intraocular pressure. Other than that, other use is the high altitude pulmonary edema. Okay, so you know that the high altitude, why they are called the high altitude pulmonary edema? Because there's a deficiency of the oxygen, concentration of the oxygen in the environment in the high altitude, like the hilly region. So what will happen? They will lead to the pulmonary edema, life-threatening condition that's called the pulmonary edema. Okay, so they are used for the treatment of the high altitude pulmonary edema. Okay, high altitude pulmonary edema, or that is also called the high altitude sickness. So the indications are the open angle glaucoma and the edema and the high altitude sickness. Okay, these are the two indications: open angle glaucoma and the high altitude pulmonary edema. Metabolic acidosis, most common is the metabolic acidosis. Okay, most common is the metabolic acidosis because they inhibit the reabsorption of the bicarbonate. So when there is the inhibition of the reabsorption of the bicarbonate, that will lead to the metabolic acidosis. Drowsiness and the paresthesia are the other, but the most common is the metabolic acidosis because they inhibit the reabsorption of the bicarbonate. Metabolic acidosis. Okay. Okay, last slide for today. Hepatic. Okay, contraindication is the hepatic cirrhosis. Just remember that due to the decreased excretion of the ammonium, that is hepatic cirrhosis. Okay, that is not important. Important thing is the mechanism of action and the indications. Indications: the high altitude pulmonary edema and the open angle glaucoma, and the mechanism of action I have already discussed, and the adverse effects, metabolic acidosis, because they inhibit. So if you go for the theory examination, they can ask you like from the loop diuretics is the important part, and the thiazide diuretics is the important part, and they may also ask you from the potassium sparing diuretics. So they can ask you the one commonly asked question in the Kathmandu University is the pharmacological basis of. Okay, last time also when in examination some confusion was there. Pharmacological basis of use of diuretics in heart failure. They act to the indirectly pharmacological basis of use of the furosemide or the thiazide diuretics or the diuretics in the heart failure. At that time, you have to remember about the mechanism of action. Mechanism of action of the this diuretics, because uh, sometimes they may ask you the directly the mechanism of action of the diuretics, which is easy to write the answer, but sometimes they may ask you the pharmacological basis of use of diuretics in heart failure or the congestive cardiac failure or the hypertension. At that time, your focus should be on the mechanism of action of the heart failure. Got the point? Okay. And sometimes they may ask you the pharmacological basis of the this drug interaction. They actually like the drug interaction, pharmacological basis of the this last time they asked you the pharmacological basis of the use of the penicillin with the this probenecid, penicillin with the probenecid. At the time, your focus should be in the drug interaction. Okay, drug interaction of the penicillin and the probenecid. Okay, what is the important from this topic? Loop diuretics and the thiazide diuretics and the potassium sparing diuretics and the acetazolamide, this is carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. They are the important part. Their mechanism of action, their indication, and they're the adverse effects. Okay. In multiple choice question, other thing, sometimes they may ask you the most potent diuretics. The most potent diuretics is the loop diuretics. Sometimes they may ask you in multiple choice question, which one is the most potent loop diuretics? The answer should be the furosemide. Okay, although sometimes there may be the one option bumetanide. Okay, so you have to take the bumetanide, but generally that is not up to your level, so write the furosemide. Okay, if there's an option bumetanide, then write the bumetanide. Okay, and the other thing is the in sporters, there will be the one sporter that is the rationale of the combination of the diuretics, this loop diuretics or the thiazide diuretics with the potassium sparing diuretics. Any drug could be there from the potassium sparing diuretics or from the loop diuretics or the thiazide diuretics, that we have already discussed about that should be there. Okay, these are the important things they will ask you in the examination. You have to focus in there. The most commonly asked question from the diuretics is the pharmacological basis of diuretics or the furosemide or the thiazide diuretics in the heart failure. Okay, so you have to think about the mechanism of action of the diuretics there, respective diuretics there. Is that clear? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay.
Sir,
Okay, yes, please.
sir, drug interaction between loop diuretics and NSAIDs.
Loop diuretics and the NSAID.
NSAIDs. Yes, sir. Sir, I couldn't understand the mechanism.
Mechanism.
सर सँगले दिन हुँदैन, दुईटा भनेको थियो अनि कसरी हुन्छ नि बुझेन.
हैन, यो क्वेशन छ र?
Yes, sir.
This question is the drug interaction between the diuretics and the
NSAIDs.
NSAID and the diuretics. Okay, actually, let me remember. If I can remember, then I will answer the question. Loop diuretics and the
PG mediated के भने थियो अनि लुप डायुरेटिक्स र प्रोस्टाग्ल्यान्डिन्स को रिलेसन के छ चाहिँ बुझ्नु.
Probably there is some relation, but I am confused today. I will see that and then I will answer you in coming class. Hey, मलाई सोध्नु त्यति
Okay,
बेला
sir.
है.
Okay, sir.
There is definitely one that is there, right? But I am confused here, so I will clear that and I will answer you later on, right? Okay. Any confusion? Anyone? Any confusion?